Where would you sleep? You would have to sleep on the floor, called a deck, with about 80 other people. Below the main deck, there would be hardly any light and hardly any air. There was not enough sleeping space for 30 sailors and 102 passengers. Some people slept in a small boat called a shallop. The shallop would be used for exploring trips later. Captain Jones let about 20 important passengers sleep in his cabin. He took a smaller cabin for himself. The sailors slept at one end of the ship. A few of the sailors may have slept in hammocks, but most of them slept on the deck. Would you be able to keep clean? You would not be able to keep clean. There were no bathrooms on the Mayflower. If you wanted to wash, you would have to wash in salty water from the sea. Most likely, you would wear the same clothes day after day, night after night, for 66 days and nights. At the end of the long voyage, your clothes would be torn and dirty and smelly too. Was it a safe voyage? It was dangerous for one small ship to make such a long voyage. In those days, one ship almost never sailed alone. One small ship alone on a huge ocean. What would happen if the Mayflower were shipwrecked? What would happen if they ran out of food and supplies? Who would get word to England? Storms were a danger. The Mayflower sailed in good winds and good weather for about a month. Then, in October, strong winds began to blow. The Mayflower tossed and rolled in the waves. The tossing and rolling made most of the passengers seasick. Just as everyone was feeling better, another storm broke. This one was worse than the last. Above the howl of the wind and the crash of the waves came the sound of something breaking. The main beam had cracked. The deck was in splinters. Water poured down on the pilgrims crowded below. They were soaked. So were their clothes, their bedding, even their food. The ship might have sunk, but someone remembered the great iron screw they had brought from Holland. The pilgrims were going to use it to help build houses in the New World. Now they used it to help keep the beam in place. Sickness was a problem. One day, the doctor's servant, young Will Button, took sick. He had ship's fever. The doctor could not help him, and Will Button died. Many people were getting sick. Now even the sailors prayed. They prayed for the end of the terrible voyage. Would you have had any fun on the Mayflower? It might be fun to watch the sailors. And you could play with the dogs. There were at least 2 dogs on board, and there was a cat. Every ship had a cat to catch the rats. There were plenty of books to read, if you liked grown-up books. One of the pilgrim leaders, William Brewster, brought along many books. If you liked to sing, you would have fun singing. The pilgrims sang psalms, religious songs every day. Would you get into trouble on the Mayflower? If you were John and Francis Billington, you would. The Billington boys were always getting into trouble. One day, Francis Billington set fire to a piece of rope. He was standing close to some barrels of gunpowder. If just one spark from the rope had gone into the gunpowder, boom! You would not be reading this book, for that would have been the end of the Mayflower, the end of the Pilgrims, and the end of our story. The Pilgrims said it was God's mercy that saved them that day. The New World. When did the Pilgrims first see land? It was the morning of November the 9th, 1620. The Pilgrims saw a sandy beach. They saw trees and bushes. They had reached Cape Cod, in what is today the state of Massachusetts. Now there is a town, Providence, at the very place the Pilgrims landed. The voyage took 66 days, counting from September the 6th, the day the Mayflower left, the Speedwell behind and sailed from Plymouth, England. How did the Pilgrims feel when they saw land? William Bradford, one of the Pilgrim leaders, wrote, "Many fell upon their knees and blessed the God of heaven who had brought them over the vast and furious ocean." The Pilgrims were full of joy, but they must have felt frightened too as they looked across the water to the lonely shore. They had sailed thousands of miles across the sea. They might never again see their homes in England. Here, in this strange land, there were no homes. There were no towns. There were no friends to greet them. They would have to stay on the Mayflower until they could find a place to live, until they could build houses. The passengers began to quarrel. Some of the Pilgrims said that when they got to the shore, they would go wherever they pleased. "None have the power to command us," they said. The Pilgrim leaders knew that they must all stay together for safety. They had to make laws that would end the quarreling.